Okay, we are live. Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome back to the next panel in the Indie New Year's kickoff event. I'm super excited for this panel because it's about fairy tale retellings and mythological fantasy, which are some of my favorite subgenres. Today we have an amazing panel of authors here. We have Rosalind Breyer, we have Stacy Willis, who I'm seeing in person for the first time after following on social media for a little while. And Sky Summers is back with us. Hey, Sky. So,
Hi.
we're going to talk a little bit about what is coming in 2023, which might include some spoilers for people. Not of books necessarily, but of things in the works. And yeah, very, very exciting. So, we're going to just kick this off by introducing ourselves, talking a little bit about the kinds of fairy tale retellings or mythological fantasy books we write. Rosalind, would you like to start and we'll just sort of go clockwise around?
All right, sure. Thank you so much for putting this all together and having me on here, Katherine. I'm so excited. Hi, everyone. I'm Rosalind, and I write fairy tale retellings. I prefer to write dark fantasy fairy tale retellings, so they're a bit on the darker, grittier side, and there's always lots of romance and I tend to just like to write darker books that are a bit more lyrical. And yeah, I've got quite a few out already, and I've got definitely some planned for this year. So I'm really looking forward to discussing those and hearing what everyone else has in the works.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on hitting the USA Today bestseller list this year.
Yes, you
You've
too.
had so many things this year between that and then your publication news. Um, just a lot going on. So, Stacy, what do you have going on for? Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've already written, and then we'll talk about what's going on in 2023 later.
Okay. So hi, I'm Stacey Willis. I'm quite new actually to publishing itself and everything. I've never done a live before either, so I'm really nervous. But
Oh,
I write I write
great.
mythological fantasy. Um, I do actually have a fairy tale retelling in my draft, but I'm too scared to touch it right now. Mythological fantasy is my comfort zone at the moment. It's what I've started with, and I'm actually almost halfway through that series now. The next
Wow.
book is coming out in 2023.
Wow. That's a lot. And thank you for letting this be one of your first lives. It's such an honor. I'm nervous too. I'm an introvert. I think a lot of us authors are introverts deep down, but your crown is gorgeous
Thank you.
and you're doing a great job. So, Sky, I know if people watch the channel, they've seen you pop up a couple times. And Rosalind, they've seen you pop up too. But, Sky, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you write for the people who don't know you.
Yeah, I'm Sky Summers, and if you think that this is your first live, Stacey, then this is, I don't know, maybe my 10th live, but and I'm a trainer in my real life, so to say, and I'm still nervous. So don't worry, you're in good company to be afraid. In
Thank you.
terms of who I am and what I write, I actually started out just like Stacey with mythology, writing about goddesses, and now 10 years later, I'm returning to them this year. And meanwhile, I've meandered into writing fairy tales. So, Stacey, you will be writing fairy tales for sure. I'm actually fulfilling both of your counts, the fairy tales and the mythology author today. Um, I do love my fairy tales, from the short stories to the longer books to series where one story starts and has a nested story, and then the second book continues off that nested story. Like Rosalind, I write more on the darker side and make people think about what the uh, what the reasons are for the characters behaving like they do, and also painting the usual good guys like fairy godmothers as villains. So
Mhm.
I like to do that.
Yes. And last year, I mentioned this to Madame Crystal Butterfly on the last chat, last panel. Last year, you and Madame Crystal Butterfly issued me a challenge. Hey, Stacy, to write a story about a frog prince.
Yes, where is it?
It is out in the epilogue of The Godmother, which is free for people who sign up to my newsletter. I did write it, and I put a little bit of my Asian inspiration into it, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. But thank you for the challenge. So if you guys didn't see the panel last year, you can go pull up that mythological fairytale retelling panel from 2021, which seems so long ago already and so fast. But yes, I did meet the challenge. There is now a frog
Looking
story.
forward to reading it.
Awesome.
And Stacy, we have two Stacys on today. So Stacy of the Embracy, welcome. We're just having a little bit of an introduction. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what kind of books you write?
Well, I'm so glad to be here. Yay. And Stacy, the other Stacy, also spells her name correctly. So I want to give a shout out to that. We both spell it right. I'm here in Dallas, Texas. I've been writing now full-time for a year. It's my third career after being in Hollywood for years and then being a mom for many years after that. And I just did a dark fantasy fairy tale, twisted fairy tale, starting with The Traveler's Tale. And I wrote all the books and published all the books in the series this year. So they're all out because I hate waiting. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm sort of impatient, and I think C.K. Soren's made a joke that Katherine doesn't hold secrets very well when it comes to publication. But yes, the biggest projects I'm working on this year are also a rapid release, but I'll talk about that later on. And then for those who don't know me, I'm Katherine D. Graham. I've had the privilege of working with several of the authors on the panel as part of the Realm of Darkness box set this year. And I'm dipping my toes into publishing a mythological epic fantasy, which is also a little dark. Not really a fairy tale retelling, but more of mythological inspiration with gods and lords and goddesses and things for 2023. So I'm excited to learn from the masters on this panel who have already put it out and already done it. So we had a couple pre-submitted questions. We'll knock those out first. And if you're watching live, please feel free to leave your questions in the chat. We can pull them up on the screen live. If you're watching on Twitter, you can put them in the comments, and I will try to have Twitter pulled up on my phone so that we can see them since I can't pull them up. Hey, Luna. It's good to have you on. So it's funny that you mentioned dark. It sounds like everybody here has a little bit of dark here and there in their story. We've been talking this morning in the dark fantasy panel and the epic fantasy panel about how you know when your book shifts from a like a bright epic type fantasy and into that darker fantasy. So for those of you who have a dark fairy tale retelling or a dark mythological fantasy, where do you feel like that line is where you switch from, you know, the bright side to the dark side where the cookies are?
No, for me, dark fantasy really means that the book, whether it's the plot or even just inside the character's mind, but in some way it takes a step into the horror genre a little bit. So there is something, there's horror going on, there's something spooky is happening, or there's more gore, or the magic itself can be dark and destructive. So it just takes that step over the line and kind of straddles the line between normal fantasy and, say, like horror or gothic fiction or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else want to tune in on that? Yeah, go ahead, Stacy.
So for me, my book was always dark to begin with, but that's just because between the heaven and underworld side of the mythology that I used, I went with the underworld. So it was already kind of dark. I just probably made it a little darker, actually. Yeah, but you won't find a lot of gore, but there is violence.
Mhm.
Yeah. But it's always been dark.
Mhm.
Yeah, and for me, I actually I named them the Darkwood series as a little warning that we because it's 1450s medieval Europe, which is dark, and then it's Brothers Grimm, the original ones, which are way dark. And so all of mine really were edging that way to begin with. I mean, I did start with a Once Upon a Time, but it quickly devolved into, in my book, Hansel and Gretel are the evil ones, and they pushed a woman into an oven. So that's kind of where I started, and it's not particularly bright and cheery in my world, but there are some moments of joy, I will say. But that's for me. I decided that Brothers Grimm and medieval times equals darker than where we are now.
Mm-hmm. And I love that because it makes me actually think of Sky's book, where you switch who would normally be considered the villain into, well, what if it's not? What if they weren't the villain? They were made out to be the way you thought they were. Sky, where do you feel like that line is between when it dips into dark versus?
Well, from what I've been hearing here is that I'm probably the lightest of the dark then, because my books have lots of humor, dark humor and dry humor in it, but my dark is not gore, not violence, but it's more the themes like, I don't know, losing kids or miscarriage or, forced proximity in the sense of, the girl actually having to do something that she doesn't necessarily want to do. Family themes like Alzheimer's, Korsakoff's, dementia, and then because of that, some of the readers have noted that this is more dark fantasy and this is more 18 plus and very serious themes and but then again, how do you actually approach these serious themes if not through fiction and through fairy tales, because Grimm were very, very grim to start out with, and then I don't know, I probably write light variations on the theme, but yeah, I twist things around to cannibalistic witches actually being lied about being cannibalistic, and godmothers being manipulative yetches and things like that. So you read the stories and the onion keeps peeling off, and you realize that there are darker themes, but there's also light at the end of the tunnel, and the happy ever afters is a must.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's so important when it comes to both fairy tale and mythological, is that these are stories that were originally meant to teach in some aspect and maybe bring our eyes and our attention to something we didn't want to see. And so in our retellings, maybe we're adding additional lessons to it without really going too philosophical into all of this. I find that I just sort of automatically drift into writing this way. But you can tell pretty early on, if you love Marley Gray characters, you're going to love a lot of the fairy tale retellings. Let's see. Luna says, what inspired you to write this genre? Stacy Willis, why don't you start us out on this one? What made you decide to write this genre?
I'm actually not sure because for my first book, the draft started out as paranormal romance. I can't pinpoint what made me change it into mythological fantasy, but it just worked so much better. I think actually part of my life and my relationships sort of seeped into the writing at some point. Like I reread it all the time and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just wrote myself.
That's so true. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you? We have Stacy and Stacy.
So for me, I'm a stepmother. And I grew up reading Grimm's fairy tales. And as I was a stepmother for many years, I was like, I kind of don't like that they're the evil ones. And I kind of did that what if with Hansel and Gretel, like what if she's not the evil one? And I also was really intrigued to write a main character who her main attribute is that she is kind. That's her main super strength, is she's a kind person. And at the end of the day, we'll pick the kind, loving choice. And having her as the stepmother to these feral twins really lent itself to a very good twist on the story. And those characters led me into the whole series. It's like I cracked open that door and out flowed a series in a matter of a year. So, but I definitely started, like you were saying, Stacy, with a personal thing of like, I just don't like it. Stepmothers are painted as evil all the time. Like, can't they be nice? It's like, I think I was. So that was my main reason for writing the books. And I just love fairy tales as a way. And again, I also agree with the happily ever after ending, or happily for now, at least, as we're wandering our way through it. It's important, I think, to end all the dark with a little, that gleam at the end.
Mm-hmm. Sky, how about you? What got you into writing this genre?
What got me into writing this genre? Well, what got me into writing mythology was I was working a very left hemisphere dominant job in London. My brain was dying on the right side. And so I started writing about goddesses. And it was literally just writing down the conversations around me with my friends, the things that I heard in cafes, which were just ridiculous conversations, but then you twist them into something which is slightly, magic and powers and mythological, and the whole story started flowing from there. So really, like life imitating, art imitating life in that way, which it always is, autobiographical to some point. And then I had a kid when I came back to Estonia, and I started telling him fairy tales. But suffice it to say that he saw Red Riding Hood, the version, or he got read the version where the wolf kind of eats everybody in the end, and then he was like, no, this can't happen. This is the wrong one. This is a bad one. So I told him a variation of it. Where the wolf, all he wanted was the pancakes from the basket because he didn't know how to make them. So the granny and Red end up teaching him, and that was the variation that I kept retelling him. And I think I'm going to write a series for kids of that, just my own one version. But that got me into writing Cinderella and Red Riding Hood, and then Wizard of Oz retellings, which, again, you sit down, you listen to conversations, and you keep having voices in your head, and you just put things on paper. So inspiration comes like that. But I didn't pick the genre, it picked me.
Wow. Rosalind. So we've got 3 that it just found them. Were you just found by the genre too?
I think so. I started writing about 5 years ago after I had my second child, and I did have postpartum depression, and I think I got into writing as just a way to work through that. And so no matter what genre I would have fallen into, I think it would have been a dark, have some darker themes and topics in it. But I've just always loved fairy tales and mythology. I was a huge Latin and Greek nerd. I loved mythology. I just always was obsessed with it. And fairy tales really are mythology. A lot of fairy tales can be traced back to ancient myths. And so really the fact that we're putting these 2 genres together, it is really fitting because they do blend together so well. And it just sort of came to me. I've always loved fairy tales. And so my first book, not the first book I wrote, but the first book I published, just had kind of nods to tons of Grimm's fairy tales. And I just loved weaving them into the story. And I just fell in love with it. And I knew like that was it. I don't know if I could go and any story I had would have to be some sort of fantasy with fairy tales and mythology mixed in, because it's just what I love. But yeah, I think it sort of kind of fell into my lap too, but it was definitely because of a lifelong love of mythology and fairy tales.
Oh, I love it. So it finds you. is what the consensus here. So if you're watching and you've ever thought about writing your own version of a fairy tale, it's a sign. Just go ahead and write it. And I got into it inadvertently to meet a challenge set by Madame Crystal Butterfly in Sky last year. And now I had written some mythological fantasy, the series I have coming out this year. I wrote back in high school, but never did anything with. And of course, they've had to be rewritten to be decent. But it was always just dabbling in things. I've always liked the idea of what if gods and goddesses weren't perfect, and what if there's more to the story than we've always been told. So they're not based on any real deities from our world. It's entirely fantasy in mind, but it definitely draws on the flaws that you see in maybe some of the Greek mythology too. Is what if we look at them as actual people? So that's, and then of course Lore Olympus brought that all out, and I was like, oh, I'm in love all over again with mythological fantasy. Okay, we got one more question, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what we're working on for the new year. This question is, how did you pick the specific fairy tales that you retold? Rosalind, why don't you start with that one?
All right. Well, that's fun. So with the first book that I had published, The Crown of Bones, so that one has nods to tons of Grimm's fairy tales. So they were all Grimm's fairy tales. I didn't dive into other fairy tales, but with that one, there's at least 20 that I counted that went into it. And so that one, I didn't really choose one. It was just kind of all over. With the second book that I published, A Sea of Pearls and Leaves, so that one is a more obscure Grimm's tale, The Three Snake Leaves. But I just love that story because the princess in it is very eccentric. She isn't your normal princess. And she comes up with this plan that she wouldn't have to marry one of her suitors because he would have to agree, should she die first, he would have to be buried alive with her. And so she doesn't think anyone's going to agree to that, but someone falls in love with her and does agree. And so I just love that idea. I was trying to dive into like, what would make her do that in the first place? Like, why would she make them agree to that? So that it just, I kept thinking about this princess and who she would be. She had to be a little eccentric, to say the least, to be able to come up with that. So that story just sort of kind of popped into my head. All the characters kind of all at once just like started playing in my mind. And then when it comes to my book that's coming out this year, or well, in 2023. So, but my book that's coming out, it was really a poem that I had written. So I don't have the book yet because we don't have a physical copy yet. It comes out in April, but I have a bookmark with the cover.
Oh,
so Her Dark Enchantments. So it's about the wicked fairy from Sleeping Beauty. And I had written a poem for like a poetry challenge about 2 years ago. And in this poem, it was also like flash fiction. It told a little story. And I just couldn't stop thinking about this character. I knew she was someone special. And it just turned into this thing where I had this image of this like healer fairy who just kept, she's kind of an underdog. And so kind of like how you guys were talking about earlier, how to flip fairy tales on their head. So this is a villain origin story of a fairy tale, but it's about the wicked fairy. And how she becomes who she is and why she becomes who she is. And so I think I'll have people rooting for the wicked fairy in this one. So
yay. So how about the rest of you? How did you come up with the specific story or stories that you decided to retell?
Well, I can go.
Okay, go ahead, Sky.
I wrote Cinderella as the first fairy tale that I wrote, and it was kind of, I just started writing, and like Stacy, I'm also a stepmother to 4, mother to 1, so big family. Not everybody lives with us at the moment, which is fine, which is why I mentioned that there are, for sure 2 kids, and sometimes plus 3 meandering through the house occasionally, laundering or coming to have food or whatever. But I kind of started writing the experience of the stepmother, and also I kind of remembered what it was. There was a teenage girl living with us at that point in my life, and then I remembered what it was to be a teenager and what it was to face. The grown-ups and how they didn't get what your life was all about. And I actually dug up some of my older diaries from God knows what time. So I used those as mock-ups for Ella's diary. So Cinder's is 2 versions of the same tale. Mm-hmm. So from the stepmother's perspective and from the stepdaughter's or Cinderella's perspective. And they're different perspectives of the same events that transpire. So not everybody knows everything, but in the end, when you read it, then you will find out what really happened. Mm-hmm. And as it turns out, in that first book, I also put in hints of the other books. I didn't intend it to be a trilogy, but it just turned out to be. So the second book is Little Red Riding Hood, and comes off the cliffhanger of the end of the first one. With shifter secrets and huntsmen being the hubbies of the stepmothers and all that. And then I also, as I later discovered, I put the Wizard of Oz retelling into the first book, so I had to write that as the third book. And I magically tied all of that into some of my other books as well, because that character, she could really be from that book because she has magic powers, because she's a goddess and she can do anything. And it just came to me that I can tie all of my books together, so I did.
Wow. So it snowballed. Started with just the one, and then before you know it, you have tons. Oh. So either Stacey, how did you pick which fairy tale or mythological inspiration to write about?
You want to go, Stacey?
Sure. Okay. So my first book, Daughter of Fire, when I changed the genre, I had just finished the entirety of Percy Jackson. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's go with Greek. But it's actually always been a goal of mine to write about as many mythologies as I can, especially ones that don't get written about very much. Greek just happened to be the first one because it was comfortable, and I didn't have to do as much research on it. But yeah, that's all, I suppose. It's like a familiarity that I feel with that one in particular. But I can't wait to dive into the other ones.
That's great. So for me, I actually wrote what is now the second book first with Twins of Darkwood, and this is Hansel and Gretel, because that was the worst stepmother I could think of that I needed to flip, because she's terrible. She's awful in the original, and I wanted to really flip it. And then that led to, I need a prequel. So then I wrote the twins' original mother, because she was a stepmother. That's this. And she's turned out to be super fun and feisty. So she became Sleeping Beauty, but she poisons herself to rescue her family. And then everybody was really loving the twins, and they slowly got better with the influence of this very nice stepmother from Twins. And so then on the Patron path, and I'm also writing about travelers and the Romany, so that there's a bit of that in there too. This is where my Greek slipped in, is this one's down in Marseille, France, and so I had the Fates come in, the 1 and 3 from Greek mythology come in, but this is Jack and the Beanstalk, and the giant is the good guy in this. And then Star-Crossed of Darkwood was book 4, and this is Rapunzel. Which I love Rapunzel. And in this one, I really started to find that my books were a long exploration of different ways to be a mother or not. It's a sharp-eyed viewer that was not, I didn't realize that was my long theme in it, but that's what it turned out to be, is a long study on motherhood in all its variations. And I'm like, look at that. So then I had to write the last book, which I don't have yet because I just published it on December 12th and my author copies haven't come in yet. But Blood to Bind combines all of them, and it's my favorite one, Beauty and the Beast, which you can have such fun with. And I just love the empowerment of women that is in that particular tale underlying it all, and that love does conquer all at the end. And so that's where I'm at. And I've got several ancillary characters moving forward into 2023 that are knocking on my head. I'm sure you guys all know what I mean. They're like, we want a story too. And so I'm definitely going to be writing like 4 of those. But 2 of them are an origin story from a woman of color in the book that I believe is going to be Egyptian. Fairy tales. So I'm pretty excited about that. So it just keeps growing. I have no idea. I actually don't think I'm in control anymore. I think all those characters are just making me a puppet.
You're just a vessel.
Got to get them on the page so that they're paying their rent.
Yeah, one of my villains wants to write her into a wonderland. So, like, what can you do? You start thinking about it. Yeah.
Sky's villain in Wonderland. I love it. Yes.
I can't wait for that. I love Alice in Wonderland. So.
Oh, yeah. So
I have fun turning everything on its head. So, and that's a crazy character. It's one of the most despicable characters you can think of. When you read my books, you will hate her, and then she wants her own book, the second one now. So. But it's true. It's the ones that we, kind of keep hurting and killing and stabbing and whatnot, doing to them. It's the ones that we love the most, actually.
That's true. Yes. So with that snippet and that slight spoiler, maybe, for what's coming, Sky, why don't you just lead us straight into what are you working on in 2023? Drafting, editing, more publishing? What does 2023 look like for you? And congrats to you, too, for your USA Today bestseller list title this year.
Thank you. Well, I can show you. It's again, it's the goddesses. This is the one that came out in our anthology in Realm of Darkness. And when we get our rights back, then I guess that we're going to publish them as separate ones. So that's going to be book 1 in the Goddesses series, and this is going to be book 2. I don't have book 3 yet, neither the cover nor the blurb, nothing, but I'm writing it. So the first book, the one in the Realm of Darkness, it was quirky romantasy, so kind of like romantic fantasy with lots of funny moments. I hope at least a couple of readers have said that I don't advise reading it with an iPad because they managed to splurt tea all over their iPads while they were reading some scenes. So the second book is going to be a bit darker because it's Life and Death, the Goddess of Light. So it's about a goddess of death that wants to kind of hand things over. She wants to die. She wants out. She's been here for thousands, if not millions of years, and she's looking for somebody to hand over, and she wants to hand over to a guy. So we will have a new god of death. And then, of course, there will be some not very gory scenes, but some. And then the whole thing, I will again turn up on its head. So you'll have to read it to find out whether she will actually die or not. But this one is more darker and serious tones. And then the third one, hopefully again next year, I'm writing is more of a rom-com type of thing, because I feel that after writing something dark and twisted, I want to write the humor. I want to write something light. I want people to kind of read and laugh out loud at stuff and, want to write my stuff rather than it's like, this is dark. I'm breaking my brain over this. I don't want to read about how people maybe were pregnant and maybe were not pregnant and all that, and while they went to hell and ended up kind of offing themselves. Anyway, so interesting choices for people. But yeah, it's a goddesses series, and the first ones are where they end up with angels. Or potential gods, and they're demigoddesses. And then the third one, it will be similar themes, but not with an angel, but it will be a demigod. So more gods in the making.
Yay! And Tyrion, I love that you're on the panel. Thank you for joining. And I was just reading over your comment about fairy tale references. Yes, they grow. So I started my own journey like that. It's just, I'm going to have these small odes here, or god or goddess there. In Splitting Dawn, my book in the Realm of Darkness set, there's some goddesses and oracles, and then that just sort of grew, and now here comes Oracle of Life. So it just spirals, and before you know it, boom, mythological fantasy.
Before you know, you have a series with 10 books.
Yes. So, Stacy Willis, what are you working on in 2023?
So I have lots of good news actually. This afternoon I just finished my final version of a book. It's not mythological fantasy or fairy tale retellings. But I think you'll like it if you enjoyed Six of Crows or Crescent City. And then so after that I'll be writing the fourth book in the Greek mythology series. I can't spoil it, but they are more gods, and a fight for the throne as well.
So happy. I was muted. I was like, yay!
And more family as well. Found family is a big thing in this series. Yeah, and then there's another book as well that I have planned at the end of 2023. But that's completely contemporary, so it's going to be a huge jump into unknown waters for me.
Do you write them all under the same pen name, or do you have a different pen name for like your contemporary?
I haven't written before, so I will have a think about it. But at the moment, it's under the same name. I hadn't thought of writing it under a different name, but it could make sense because all I've written up until now is different versions of fantasy. So, yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah. So, Rosalind, what is coming in 2023? Oh, sorry,
Can I jump in about the different pen names?
Yeah.
A friend of mine, an author friend of mine, uses different pen names when the first genre that she writes is YA, really clean Christian fantasy, and the second one is a bit more gory, more dark, more bludgeoning to death and action adventure. So as not to confuse her readers, she chose different pen names. But if you don't have that one, it doesn't matter if it's different genres, then I would suggest you to keep one name.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I might just keep it then.
That makes sense. I personally just wouldn't want to have to deal with the extra social media that would go into
As much as we love all the readers who are on. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't think I put enough time into my pen name, though I'm happy with the name that I've published under because it's got a sentimental value to me. But after I started publishing, people were like, you're going to primarily write dark, epic fantasy. You're a woman. You should have done your initials or something. And I was like, you know what? There's so many of these authors that are publishing under initials are women that I'm not embarrassed or shy about people knowing that I'm a woman writing a book that may not always have romance in it. But not that there's anything wrong with the romance. I write some with romance and some without. But the pen name, if you're getting into writing and thinking of publishing, definitely take the time to think about the work that goes into the pen name and everything too. Because once you have books out, then you have to make these decisions, right? Of, do I keep this pen name? Do I start a new one? But yeah, so Rosalind, what are you working on in 2023? Because you've already had a huge 2022, and congratulations on your publishing. Your representation is just amazing.
Thank you. Yes, so 2022 was a big year with, the Realm of Darkness, and then getting, and planning to have my book published next year. So it's been a really great year, and we'll see if we can top it. So, but basically in 2023, I have Her Dark Enchantments, the Wicked Fairy origin story, that comes out in April. So basically, we're with the publishing house, we're just going to be really working on marketing a lot up until then. But in the meantime, I will be doing some writing. Just a couple weeks ago, I finished the first draft of a book called The Bone Needle, which is the sequel to The Crown of Bones. So my goal is to get that revised and edited and published. I'm hoping for Halloween. Like, that is my goal, publishing date. So maybe you guys can hold me to it. But I'm hoping for Halloween. And then a book that I'm drafting that probably won't even see the light of day until 2024, but I'm hoping to finish it in 2023. It's a book called The Mourning Queen, but with a U, like mourning, like sad. So it kind of will tie into, I guess it's similar to Her Dark Enchantments because it's a villain origin story. It's the story of the evil queen. And so, but it's more set in like a Victorian inspired fantasy setting. And she sort of invents mourning jewelry, and she can see the death of the people who she creates mourning jewelry for, with their hair. And so, yeah, that's what I have so far. I've got about half of it written. And so I'm really excited about it, and I'm hoping I can finish it in next year and then, look to publishing it, querying it. Who knows what I'm going to do with it. But those are my goals for 2023. And I think it's going to be a good year.
Yay. So exciting. It's always so daunting, I think, to follow up a good year because you're like, how do I top this year? But we don't always have to top the year in volume or anything. It's about what's needed for us, I guess, in that year. So Stacy, what have you in the works for 2023?
I'm so glad you guys are all so inspiring. I'm so happy to be on this panel with my people. It's so great, and everybody is watching too. I so appreciate it. So I had set myself the deadline to do all of the books in the series this year. And so that meant when 12/12 was clicking around, I was in a panic because I was just behind. I traveled to Greece this year. A lot of things happened that were wonderful, but I slowed my writing down to the point where I was writing about 8,000 words a day to get to my goal. And that's like quadruple what I normally do. I usually write 2,000 words a day. So I was a little tired. So I took a little break here, and I'm going to start back up on Monday. And I love that idea of accountability. So y'all, I'm starting back Monday. I really do want to write the two shorts. Well, there may be longer stories. I'm not sure. But one that twists a Little Mermaid and one that twists Three Little Pigs. And the wolf, from the wolf's point of view, of course, because that's what I do. And I'm really looking forward to The Little Mermaid is going to be a female-female romance that I'm really looking forward to bringing that in to the thing because it's just, I love it. And then I definitely want to write the Egyptian. I think that's probably going to be a duology or perhaps a standalone in that Darkwood umbrella. And then as a palate cleanser, I'm doing a pen name called Stacy Christine, which is my first and second name, first and middle name. Paranormal romance, sports romance. I know it's a combo platter but I plan on a trilogy in that. I'm a swimmer. So I was like, you know what?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I see no sports romance with swimming. And golly, those fellas are awful cute. And they're wet to begin with. So, right?
I was a swimmer.
I'm not
This is number 3.
I'm not trying to be spicy, but I'm really actually looking forward to writing a trilogy in that as well. So that looks like 6 or 7 books that I'll be writing, and that seems about right for me, as long as I don't go off track and travel elsewhere in 2023. But I'm kind of down for travel, so you never know. So that's what I've got on deck.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very inspiring.
Oh goodness. Love to hear everyone's goals for 2023. Super inspiring. Oh. Yeah, I think
What about
I
you,
always
Kath?
have more. Oh, sorry.
What about you, Kath? What do you have coming up in 2023?
Well, coming off the Realm of Darkness box set, which I have linked for everybody in the description because it is coming down in the new year. So if you want a copy of all 30 plus full length books for 99 cents, this is the weekend to get it. But coming off of that, I was like, how do I keep my momentum forward? Because I'd never been part of a box set before Realm of Darkness, and the work and the hours and the time that went into that shut out everything else. So I really have only been doing novellas. But now that that's out, I'm going to rapid release a 5-volume dark mythological epic fantasy starting in January. 5 books, 5 months. And those are sitting ready to go. The first one will come out on January 17th, Oracle of Life. And then I'm also trying to finish the Splitting Worlds series. Splitting Dawn was the first full-length book in that series, the one that was in the Realm of Darkness set. And the rest have been novellas. But I have one final full-length novel that I'd like to round off this year, and then also a second half of my grimdark vampire apocalypse book, The Slayer Queen's Warlock. But that one I have not revised yet, so if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, that's okay. But just trying to get, I guess I'm trying to get into the cycle of have one that I'm writing, one that I'm editing, one that I'm prepping for publication, instead of just writing or just editing or just doing whatever. But because I know all of us mostly work a day job too. Some people don't have to work a day job and write, but when you're indie published, a lot of us do. I edit for a living, so I'm in books all the time. And some days I just don't feel like picking up my own book. So sometimes my plans, not the ones that are on pre-order, but the ones that I haven't set pre-orders for, I drag my feet on a little bit. So I've got to, those pre-orders hold me accountable because there's drastic consequences if you miss your pre-orders, especially on Amazon. So this year I definitely want to wrap up the other 2 series and get this series out, and then we'll see what happens from there. Thank you for asking, Sky. We've got some comment. Oh, hi. I also love to hear everyone's goals. You're rock stars. Yes, it's wild how our imaginations keep pouring out ideas. They never wait until you're done with one. If you wait until you're done with one, then you're like, what should I write next? And it's like blank. It's always while you're writing one that you need to be finishing. It's like, oh, I have this great idea.
I don't have that problem of being blank. I'm always, buzzing things, and I have trouble getting them down.
That's what
I
happens.
have trouble, not uniting stuff. Whatever charity anthologies we do with short stories, I have trouble not uniting those and not kind of crisscrossing to the other stuff. It's manic. Sorry.
That's so smart though, because then if someone picks it up, they can go and read your other works, and that's really neat that it all ties together. I love that.
Yeah. And I love connecting with this panel for readers too, because here we've got 4 different authors that all write in these genres. If you've been following one, you now have 3 more to add. While you're waiting on someone's book, you can read one of the other's books. And that's the beauty of being indie, is it's like a big family community. A found family, if we're going trope here, of writers to commiserate. Let's see, we got a couple social media questions, and then we're going to wrap up with some special key things that everybody wants you to know about for 2023. The first is Realm of Darkness authors. That would be, Rosalind and Sky and I. Will you be doing another box set in 2023, like Twice Upon a Name? So Twice Upon a Name is the sequel to Once Upon a Name. I think
Yeah.
Susan.
Once Upon a Name is this one.
Hmm.
And it's a charity anthology that we did this year in April. The sequel is going to be Twice Upon a Name. And it's a collection of short stories. This one actually has a funny background. An author friend of mine, Lindsay Hall, she dared everybody. So we do a lot of things on dares, apparently, as you do. So she dared everybody to go into a name generator, put in their author name or real name, and to get a fantasy name out of it, and then to write a short story with that fantasy name. That's how this book came about. We didn't want to stop there because it was a charity anthology to support people who wanted to read more. And we are doing volume 2 with a different focus. The first one was just whatever story comes. The second one is Twice Upon a Name, and it's along the idea of the 12th night from the Bard, of stories of mix-up and mixed identities and stuff like that. And we're the beta stories, I've just read them. They're fantastic. I love every single one of them. And this one is coming out in April. It's not a sequel from the Realm of Darkness, but it is a sequel from a charity anthology that we did in 2022.
Yeah, Realm of Darkness was full-length novels. And although some were series starters that will have other books by those authors, there's not a direct follow-up. So I've actually gotten people PMing me going, can I mention you about Realm of Midnight? That's a separate set, separate authors. Maybe there's some overlap, but they're not the same series. There's no continuations. You should definitely still go get it because that many books for 99 cents is great, but it's not the same series. I am probably done with box sets for a very long time. It was a year and a half's worth of work to get Realm of Darkness out, and with everything else I want to put out next year, I just don't have the time to do it properly. How about you, Rosalind?
Same here. I would totally do like short stories and submit for anthologies, things like that. But when it comes to a box set of books, at the moment, I have no plans for that. It was incredible, and I would love to someday, but not next year. I have other things I need to get done. So basically my story for The Realm of Darkness, The Mermaid and the Pearl, I had to write that so quickly. And I also pushed other projects back because of it, to get everything done and, for The Realm of Darkness. And it was all worth it. It was so incredible, not just the success that we had, but just I've learned so much from the other authors, and it was an incredible experience. But it was also a whirlwind. Sometimes I feel like it was all a fever dream and I forget about it entirely until someone brings it up. I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote an extra book. Like I forget about the book that I wrote, and it's an entire book.
Or if somebody asks, so did you get that USA Today listing? Did you? I'm like, I've never posted about it, really?
So Stacy Willis, I love your crown. Are you going to be writing fantasy stories with royals? I haven't read your book, so I don't know.
So the first series is actually about royalty, technically. It's like, think of it as the royal family of the Greek underworld. That's
nice.
what it revolves around.
I want to read it now.
I think there's always sort of been royalty in a way in most of my books. The one I just finished writing also has royalty. The antagonist is a king. Yeah.
So you can go find Stacy's books. All of these authors' links are in the description box on YouTube. If you're watching on Twitter, you'll have to hop over to YouTube to get them or find them on their social media. But go there and catch up with the books before book 4 comes. And so Then, last one, and we'll do our wrap up. Stacy.
What was the question? I've been so fascinated with what everybody said.
I love it because a mythological fantasy about a family who plays sports? Question mark.
No, it's just that is my palate cleanser is definitely it's gonna be sports romance, but I always have a wisp of magic just because I really believe in magic. I just think we call it different things in different eras. But I always have to have a little bit of like a ghosty or a mermaid. I need those in my books. I just believe in that so much. So I'm sure, being a water sport, there will definitely be somebody with a tail somewhere in the book. Sure, that's just how I am.
That guy rocks his butterfly. Is all I gotta say. Wave. So before we wrap up, we're going to go around. I'm actually going to let you go, Stacy, first. And just if you could give us one special thing that people should really be keeping an eye on for, whether that's a sale or an event or a special book, what would that be?
So The Traveler's Tale is free on for the today and tomorrow. This is the first in series, and I just went ahead and said the twins was going to be 99 cents. So you can get them both today and tomorrow. And I just think you'll really love these books. And I would love some reviews. If you do it, please review, because that's what really helps all of us indie authors so much is your reviews. Just stars is fine. You don't have to write a novel. Stars are good. So that's what I have going on. And I just so appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Rosalind, what should we be looking out for that's special for you?
All right, I guess the biggest thing it will be to just go ahead and pre-order her Dark Enchantments with Quill and Crow Publishing House. It comes out April 25th, but I'm doing a huge book box giveaway. So if you pre-order, so you'll get signed copies. I have custom candles, custom tea. I've got just a bunch of other things I'm throwing in, character art, bookmarks, tons of fun stuff that will be in the book boxes. Plus, everyone who enters the pre-order giveaway will get my poetry collection, her dark and enchanting poems. Plus, I have another special surprise that will be coming out. I'll talk about that in the new year. But everyone who enters the pre-order giveaway will also win another special surprise. So, that comes out April 25th, her Dark Enchantments.
Very exciting. Stacy, what's the one thing we should really be looking for in 2023?
Is it limited to just one thing?
Well, we might let you cheat and put a couple in there.
I guess the biggest thing right now would be that book that I just finished. It's coming out on the 25th of January.
Oh, so good.
So do look out for it. It's very special. I have some important people reading it for me. So, I can't wait. It's called There's a Dagger in Your Back. I've never read the title.
Love that.
Yeah.
I'm loving all of these books so much. My reading list just got this much longer. Sky, what is one key thing we should be looking for from you in 2023?
Yeah, just like Stacy, since I'm quite greedy, then my natural question would be just one. But okay, if I have to do just one, then I would have people looking out for an omnibus of these three. So this is Cinders, this is Embers, and this is Ash. I've just at planning stage, and the cover designer is designing the cover for the omnibus, but it should come out January, and it will have all three ebooks in them. But if you want these babies, if you want the paperbacks, then you can follow on TikTok. I have the 5K giveaway. Once I reach 5K followers there, I'm giving away all of the whole trilogy of paperbacks.
Wow. That's a huge steal. And I have one of your paperbacks, and I love that one half is printed one direction and the other half is printed the other direction for the other point of view. just as
Not for Amazon though, because they don't do flipped books. They
Mhm.
print straight as it comes. The ones that you got, so which is, I'll show it to you. So if you look at it this way, then it's the stepmother's version. If you flip the book, then it's Cinderella's Diary. So that's the one that I have printed in Estonia, but Amazon doesn't do that. They just have the text all one way.
Oh, well, it's still good to read both the diary and the regular book. And yes. All right. So there's a lot of fantasy news for everybody viewing or watching the replay. Thank you so much for tuning in to meet these amazing fantasy retelling mythological fantasy authors and kicking off the new year with us. Thank you all so much for joining me on New Year's Eve.
Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you.
So as I said at the beginning, we're paneling all weekend long. Making up verbs. We're paneling all weekend long. We've got 3 or 4 more panels today. The next one starts in about half an hour, and that's Portal and Dual Dimension Fantasy. So if you love that genre, subscribe so you can get a notification when it goes live. If you're on YouTube or on Twitter, it will be streaming on Twitter as well. But thank you all for being here. I wish you all the best with your books in 2023. We can't wait to hear how it all works out. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Happy New Year. Woo.